All right, so we're diving into Drucker today. And, one of the things that just jumps out at you right away is this idea that management isn't just like a business thing. It's like this core part of how society even
Yeah,
works.
it's almost like woven into the fabric of like modern life,
Yeah.
you know, and tied to this belief we have that, we can actually shape our economic well-being.
It's like more than just a job. It's like this deeper thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like this idea that through organized effort and progress, we can actually make things better, improve the human condition. And management is how we do that.
Right. It's taking all those resources and knowledge and kind of like putting them together to actually get somewhere.
Yeah. What's interesting is the sources even say that the competence of management is actually like decisive for the free world.
That's a big statement.
Uh,
When you hear that, it makes you think about all the times you've seen good management like really make a difference in an organization or a project.
oh, absolutely.
Uh,
Or even the opposite, right? Like when bad management has just messed things up completely,
oh yeah, for sure. Have you seen that like in your own experience?
countless times. I think anyone who's worked in an organization has seen both sides of that coin. And what's fascinating is how the idea of good management has evolved over time.
How so?
Well, initially it was all about systems and processes, like managing things. But then there was this shift, this recognition that the real key is managing people.
Like the human element of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like tapping into that human potential to boost productivity. And one of the sources even says that no area in industry is less efficient than human resources, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. It makes you wonder how much potential is being wasted.
Right. And, there's this idea that even the lowest worker needs like a managerial attitude.
So it's not just about managers managing. It's like everyone needs to have that mindset.
Yeah, like taking ownership, problem solving, thinking ahead. It's a really interesting concept.
Have you seen that play out in real life, like companies that have successfully cultivated that kind of attitude?
Oh, yeah. Think about companies known for being innovative, always improving. They often empower their employees to identify problems and come up with solutions.
Like a bottom-up approach instead of just top-down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can have huge benefits like faster problem solving, more engaged employees, and a more adaptable organization.
Makes sense. And speaking of organizations, the sources talk about this idea of the spirit of an organization, and they use Carnegie as an example.
Right, like his ability to get the best people. That's so crucial. Not just hiring well, but creating an environment where people want to be and do their best work.
And they emphasize focusing on abilities rather than disabilities, which is so relevant today.
Totally. Like that point about Harry Hopkins. He had all these health problems, but he was super effective because he had to focus on what truly mattered.
Constraints can actually make you stronger in a way.
It's true. And it kind of ties into this bigger idea from the sources about the importance of social status and function for individuals to feel connected to society.
Like if you don't have that sense of purpose or belonging, you might see society as just chaotic and unpredictable.
Right. And that puts a lot of responsibility on organizations to provide that sense of function.
Definitely. And it's interesting to contrast that with pressures of the market. Like businesses have to constantly adapt to survive.
Yeah. They take you rid of what's not working to stay profitable. It's different from like government agencies or nonprofits, where economics isn't always the main driver.
That's a really important distinction. And it leads us to innovation and change, which the sources talk a lot about.
Like Schumpeter's view of profit as a result of innovation and the source of jobs. That's a big idea.
It's not just about making money. It's about creating something new that has value and that creates jobs.
Exactly. And the sources emphasize that innovation isn't just for high-tech industries. Even in more traditional sectors, it's crucial for survival.
Can you give me some examples of that? Like industries that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being super innovative, but they are?
Sure, think about something like insurance,
Right.
right? It's not flashy, but there's constant innovation in terms of new products and services to meet changing customer needs.
Or even something as basic as food.
Absolutely. Like new ways of processing and packaging and even developing entirely new food products. It's happening everywhere.
Right. It's about always looking for better ways to do things. And that brings us to the entrepreneur, the person who sees change as an opportunity, not a threat.
Exactly. Like that's their mindset. They actively seek out change and find ways to exploit it.
And the sources actually boil down the core functions of a business to just two things, marketing and innovation.
It's so simple, but so true.
Yeah.
Marketing is about understanding and creating a customer. And innovation is about creating the value that those customers are looking for.
So if you're not doing both of those things, you're missing out.
Big time. And then there's this idea of the change leader, the person who not only embraces change, but actually knows how to make it happen effectively.
That seems like a super valuable skill in today's world.
Absolutely. It's about having a vision for the future and knowing how to bring people along with you.
Mm.
And it also means letting go of old ways of doing things that don't work anymore.
The sources warn against just focusing on the short term at the expense of the long term.
Right. You can't just be chasing quick wins. You have to think about the big picture.
And to help with that, they outline 8 key areas where businesses need to set objectives.
Yeah, market standing, innovation, productivity, resources, profitability management, development, worker performance, and public responsibility.
It's a pretty comprehensive list. When you look at that, do you see any areas that businesses tend to overlook?
I think sometimes management development and worker performance can get neglected. It's easy to focus on the numbers, but you can't forget about the people.
Right. Those are the ones who actually make the numbers happen.
Exactly. And public responsibility is becoming increasingly important too.
Yeah.
It's not just about profit anymore. It's about making a positive impact on the world.
Totally. And speaking of profit, the sources break down its purpose into 3 things. It's a measure of effectiveness, it covers the cost of staying in business, and it provides capital for future growth.
And they make a really strong point that a business that doesn't earn its cost of capital is actually being irresponsible.
Can you explain that a bit more? Like, what does cost of capital even mean?
Basically, it's the return that investors expect for putting their money into the business. If you're not earning that much, you're essentially losing money.
So it's about sustainability in the long run.
Exactly. You need to be generating enough value to keep the business going and to grow in the future.
And then strategic planning is all about making decisions today to prepare for an uncertain tomorrow.
It's not about predicting the future because you can't do that. It's about being prepared for different possibilities.
What do we have to do today to be ready for an uncertain tomorrow? That's a great question to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears and talk about the customer, because ultimately that's what it's all about.
The sources ask this really fundamental question: what is value to the customer? And they caution against assuming you know the answer.
They give this great example of a teenage girl buying shoes versus a young mother. Their needs and priorities are completely different, even though it's the same product.
So it's not just about the product itself. It's about understanding what the customer is actually looking for. What problem are they trying to solve?
Exactly. And that leads us to this bigger conversation about the knowledge worker and the network society.
Like how the nature of work is changing so rapidly.
Right. We're seeing this rise of non-manual labor and the application of knowledge to create more knowledge. It's a fundamental shift.
And the knowledge society is described as borderless and offering upward mobility through education. But there's also a greater risk of failure if you don't keep learning and adapting.
And knowledge workers have to be more self-directed. They can't rely on a single employer for their entire career. They need to manage their own skills and development.
Lifelong learning is becoming more and more essential.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing a lot more flexibility in work arrangements with more contractors, freelancers, and remote workers.
It's a whole new world of work. And what about leadership in this new world? What do the sources say about that?
Well, they actually warn against charismatic leaders, which is interesting.
What do you mean? Isn't charisma a good thing?
It can be. But history is full of examples of charismatic leaders who are also terrible people.
So it's not enough to just be charming. You have to actually be competent and ethical.
Exactly. They use Alfred Sloan as an example.
Right.
He was known for being fair and impartial, even though he was also personally kind.
So it's about finding that balance.
Right. And when it comes to building teams, and especially succession planning, they highlight some common mistakes to avoid.
Like what?
Well, one is just trying to create carbon copies of yourself.
Yeah.
You need to find people who are different and who bring their own unique strengths.
And not just promoting your favorite people or the ones who have been there the longest.
Right. You have to be objective and choose the best person for the job. Sloan believed that was the most important job of a manager.
It makes sense. And they also talk about focusing on people's strengths rather than their weaknesses.
Totally. You'll get a lot further by building on what people are good at rather than trying to fix what they're not good at.
And there's this interesting concept of the widowmaker position.
Oh, yeah. The role that just seems to defeat everyone who takes it.
So instead of just trying to find the perfect person, you might need to actually redesign the role itself.
Exactly. Sometimes the problem isn't the people, it's the job. Now let's zoom out a bit and talk about the role of government and the social sector.
The sources talk about this decline in faith in government. Like, people are starting to realize that government can't solve every problem.
And they advocate for a stronger, more focused government that governs effectively, rather than just trying to do everything.
And we're also seeing the rise of nonprofits as a major force in addressing social issues.
Yeah, they can often be more agile and responsive than government agencies. And it's important to note that they need good management just as much as for-profit businesses do.
So it's not just about good intentions, it's about having the skills and structures to make a real impact.
Exactly. Now let's talk about ethics, because that's a thread that runs through all of this.
The sources say that a moral society needs private virtue. Like, it's not enough to just rely on laws and regulations. People have to be good themselves.
And they make this interesting argument that capitalism can be a moral system if profit is seen as the cost of creating and maintaining jobs.
It's a different way of thinking about it. It's not just about making money. It's about supporting people's livelihoods.
Right. And they also warn against excessive executive compensation.
Right.
It can lead to resentment and damage morale.
And ultimately, it's about treating everyone in the workplace with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. It's basic human decency. Finally, the sources talk about the importance of managing your time effectively.
Like, that's the first step to being a more effective executive.
Exactly. You have to understand where your time is going and make conscious choices about how you spend it.
And for knowledge workers, it's about knowing your strengths, your work style, and your values, and finding roles that align with those things.
So it's a lot about self-awareness and making sure you're in the right place.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways for you?
For me, it's the importance of understanding customer value, not assuming you know what they want, but really digging deep and figuring it out.
And for me, it's the emphasis on innovation as a core function alongside marketing that really changes how you think about business strategy.
And the need for knowledge workers to be self-directed and constantly learning, that's more important than ever in today's world.
Absolutely. So for our listeners out there, I'd ask you to consider this. What's one assumption you might be making about your own customers, whether they're clients, colleagues, or even your audience, that might be worth re-examining?
And with the changing nature of work, what's one skill or area of knowledge you might commit to developing further in the coming months?
These are great questions to ponder. The insights from Drucker remind us that understanding fundamental principles and adapting to change are ongoing journeys, and we hope this deep dive has given you some valuable tools for that journey.